Jersey's drinking culture. Are we just a bunch of alcoholics clinging to a rock? Do we have a drinking culture, or do we have a drinking problem? Let's have a look at it. So, first of all, why do people drink? Well, I've categorised people into one of three categories. These are alcoholics, weekend binge drinkers, and casual or occasional drinkers. I think you could go into more detail on them categories if you wanted to, but those are the categories I've picked just to keep it simple. So let's have a look at those categories in a bit more detail. Firstly, alcoholics. Well, why do people become addicted to alcohol in the first place? The truth is there's many reasons why people become dependent on alcohol. There are biological reasons, psychological, socio-cultural reasons. If parents are alcohol dependent, children are 4 times more likely to develop a dependence on alcohol. This is usually because of their attitude that they've adopted from their parents towards the use of alcohol. Even major stress events, such as a bereavement, can lead to heavy alcohol use, which then goes on to lead to a dependence. To be honest, it's often a combination of factors. Alcohol addiction, as with any other addiction, is usually the addict's solution to some other problems in their life. Alcohol was their solution. It's often these other problems that need to be resolved before an addict can start a road to recovery. Some people might also say they have an addictive personality. However, looking into this, there is no real evidence to support that this is a viable reason for alcohol dependence. Addiction is a complicated issue. It's a massively complicated issue, and I don't really want to delve into it in too much detail in this video because it's so complicated that I don't feel I would do it justice. So that's all I'm going to say about alcohol dependency. Second category is weekend binge drinkers. Now, we are all familiar with the term binge drinking. It's been popularised by many a report in the media over the last decade or so. So what do we actually mean when we say binge drinking? Well, binge drinking is the drinking of alcoholic beverages with the primary intention of becoming intoxicated by heavy consumption of alcohol over a short period of time. That's the definition. So there's two aspects of that I really want to highlight. One is the primary intention of becoming intoxicated, and the other is over a short period of time. I'll explain later on why them 2 points are important. So, why is binge drinking a problem in the first place? Well, firstly and most importantly, consistent binge drinking is just a fast track to the first category of being an alcoholic, where you're no longer drinking to get drunk, rather you're drinking in order to feel normal. This is when you start becoming dependent on alcohol. Secondly, the short-term problems from binge drinking. These are the immediately harmful effects on your health. For example, hangovers, we've all experienced it. Headaches, nausea, shakiness, vomiting, memory loss. These are all things that are effects of binge drinking. There are also the risks that you could overdose on alcohol. Something people don't realise, you can overdose on alcohol. Most often this is called alcohol poisoning. When a person drinks too much, their body reflexes are affected. This includes breathing, and I apologise if I pronounce this incorrectly, their pharyngeal reflex, or as you and I would probably call it, the gag reflex, which can lead to a person choking on their own vomit and even dying from this. I think of that as a way to go, choking on your own vomit. There are also social implications, such as crime. We all know there is a massive impact on crime when alcohol is involved, whether that be from assaults, disturbances, breaches of the peace, to domestic violence. Often that plays a massive, alcohol plays a massive role in domestic violence, to drink driving, which we all know is a hugely dangerous thing to do, but obviously you take alcohol out of the equation, it's not there. Also, unplanned pregnancies, unplanned sex, unprotected sex, transfer of STIs, STDs, if you look into the statistics of all of these sorts of issues, alcohol plays a massive part. A massive part. Also, there's the shame and embarrassment of your behaviour. We've all done it. I don't care who you are. We've all done it where you've woken up in the morning and gone, oh crap, what did I do last night? What did I say to my boss on that work party? Did I chat up that woman that I know has got a boyfriend? Did I do this, that and the other? We've all done something stupid when we've been out drinking and we've had too much to drink. The loss of valuables. Honestly, if I could own every item that has been lost due to people being too drunk, I would be a very, very wealthy man. The number of people that lose phones, handbags, purses, jewellery, it's ridiculous. Overspending. I used to work with someone, I won't say their name, but I used to work with someone who would consistently tell me about how much money they had spent on their credit card the weekend before. Completely oblivious to it at the time. It's only when he looked at his statements the next day that he realised he'd bought bottles of champagne or shots for half the bar and all the rest of it. Massive, massive problem. Time off work. A huge amount of sick days are due to people drinking the night before, drinking way too much and not being able to function the next day. Whether that be because of hangovers or just because of the fact that whatever job they do, it would be completely unacceptable for them to turn up in the state they are. Even to the point where you're still drunk the next morning and you can't drive to work, or you can't go to work because your job involves doing something like driving. There are community implications. The first one, and I think this is the one that affects most people, is the noise. The noise of everybody coming out at 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's suddenly this drunken choir who decide to give you a rendition of 500 Miles or whatever the song's called, or Road to Amarillo, and oh my god, it's frustrating. Or people having arguments, and it's not even a fun argument to listen to either, it's the most pathetic argument, and they're just screaming their heads off at 3-4 o'clock in the morning. The rubbish, the mess. If you've ever been into town at 3-4 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, Sunday morning, it's a complete shithole, excuse my French. It's disgusting, the state of the place. A&E department. If you've been unfortunate enough to have to go to A&E on a Friday, Saturday night, good luck to you. Because there are so many people, they've either drunk too much and they're in a hospital, or they've had an accident because they have drunk too much. You know, alcohol played a part in so many different things that has filled up A&E. And at the end of the day, it's the taxpayers that have to pick up the bill for this. You know, you go into town on a Saturday morning to do your shopping, you wouldn't even know there was nightclubs in the area because it's all nice and tidy, everything's nice and clean, it's all been cleaned up. Well, some poor buggers had to actually do that, and someone's had to pay him to do that. And that's me and you. We've paid for that. Also, you've got the hospitals, the emergency services, you know, the police, the nurses, the A&E departments. We're paying for all that, and it's all being used as a result of alcohol. I say all. A lot of it at the weekend. So that's binge drinking. Now let's look at your casual and your occasional drinkers. Well, they're the people who, they go out on the odd occasion for a few drinks. They're the people who you invite out on a Friday after work for a few drinks. Sometimes they come, sometimes they won't come, and even when they do, they'll only have a few and then they're going home. Or they stay out for the whole night, but they only have a few drinks, and generally speaking, they know when to stop. They know when they've had enough. Those are the people I'm calling your casual drinkers. Obviously, you have a fourth category I've not mentioned here, which is your teetotalers. They're the people that never drink, and well done to them. But I think we would all like to put ourselves, if we could, we'd all like to put ourselves in that casual or occasional drinker category. I think that's where we all see ourselves. But I think a hell of a lot more people are in the binge drinking or alcoholic category. And the scary thing is, I don't think they even know it. I don't think they even suspect that they would be ever classed as one of those two things. There are a lot of people that I know I've worked with or I've dealt with in my life who have this, and I'm gonna go for a specific type of person here, but I'm sure there's many more. The sort of middle class person who enjoys their wine, and it's almost seen as culturally acceptable because it's quite you almost seem quite cultural, I suppose. I enjoy wine, I enjoy fine wines. Yeah, okay, but it's still alcohol and you're still drinking it every night. I remember, as I was growing up as a kid, one of my very good friends, whenever we wanted to go out or we wanted to lift home, it would always have to be my parents that took us, because his parents, as soon as they'd come home from work, had a drink, always, and they were never able to drive their cars. So there are a lot of people in this boat where they come home from work and the first thing they do is grab that bottle of wine or grab a beer out of the fridge. And because they do it just casually at home on their own or with their partners or whatever, they don't realise that actually if I said you couldn't have that glass of wine, or I said you couldn't have that beer, would you miss it? And the answer is yeah, you would. You don't realise you're dependent on it. You don't realise that that's what you've been looking forward to on your way home from work, is having that beer when you got in. And then there are a lot of people who fall into the binge drinking category and don't know it. These are people who go, I've had a stressful week at work, so I'm going to enjoy myself, I've earned it, it's the weekend, you only live once. All these sorts of throw off sort of statements that just justify it. Yeah, okay, fine, you have worked hard and it is the weekend, but you don't need to get bladdered. And you don't realise that you do it every weekend. Every weekend you do it. So you do fall into this category. Anyway, so those are my three categories of drinkers. Now, what can be done about binge drinking? Why do people binge drink? Why do we do it in the first place? Well, I think there's a number of reasons why people will binge drink, and I'm not talking about just drinking here, I'm talking about binge drinking, okay? Firstly, there's the marketing of alcohol, and although it's regulated, it still heavily makes alcohol out to be, it puts alcohol on a pedestal, I think, as this is something fun to do, this is something you should be doing with your mates. And different types of drink are marketed differently, obviously. I mean, if you look at likes of Carling and Foster, they're all marketed as a bunch of mates having a laugh and that sort of thing, whereas perhaps your more sophisticated drinks are marketed more as it will be some dim lit bar with jazz playing in the background or something like that. But in any case, it's always marketed as these these are very nice people, these are people you want to be, and go out and drink and you will be, typical adverts. We don't see that with smoking. But, many people will say alcohol and tobacco are just as dangerous as each other and cause just as many problems as each other. At least with tobacco, you are only causing problems to yourself, and if you smoke in an enclosed environment, perhaps you're passively harming those around you, but you're not having a great massive impact on the community that you live in necessarily. Whereas with alcohol you are. So why is alcohol okay to advertise and tobacco isn't? Also, have you ever been into a shop and seen cigarettes on offer? Buy one get one free. Never happens, does it? Never happens. Alcohol, all the time. I would say, you get them books that come through the letterbox with different offers on them, and there's always a page dedicated just to alcohol. What are the offers on alcohol at the moment? And again, this is another encouragement to buy more alcohol, to drink more alcohol, stock up on it whilst it's on offer. And this is something, again, if it was cigarettes, there would be uproar. But with alcohol, it's okay. It's strange. A lot of young people have the attitude of, it's fine, I'm just enjoying a drink, I've got the right to enjoy a drink, I'm not in, they don't recognise that they've got a problem, and so they go out and do it. And there's this attitude of, or a culture of, a lad culture, and ladette culture, I suppose, that drinking is macho, and we have drinking competitions, or we'll have games revolved around drinking. If you go into a pub and you're with your mates and at halfway through the night you say, actually, do you know what, mate, I'll just have a shandy, or I'll just have a lemonade lime, the looks you get. And even if you go and ask a bartender and say, can I just have a Coke, please? Go, sorry, do you want just a Coke? As if, he's shocked you didn't ask for something in that Coke. There's even different shots and drinks designed for you to specifically drink them quickly. I mean, no one ever made a shot called a slippery nipple or whatever they are called for you to sit and sip it, did they? No, you'll meant to just neck it and get on with the next drink. And even the pubs and clubs now, I feel, are designed specifically to get you to drink more. I mean, obviously that's their business model. The more alcohol they sell, the better. They don't make money off anything else. But you go into a lot of places, and even places that aren't nightclubs, they're just late night bars. The seating, there's very little seating. There's very little table space. So you're forced to stand up and hold your drink, which encourages you to drink it faster. There's also a lot of loud music playing, even in places that don't have a dance floor. They play loud music. Why? So you can't talk. Why? So you drink more. Everything's just, the whole thing is just geared around just getting you to drink as much as possible. And then the annoying thing is, as soon as you're drunk, you can't be drunk on licensed premises, mate, we'll chuck you out. I'm only drunk because you keep forcing me to drink. But I'm going off topic. So what have we done to try and stem this binge drinking culture? Well, first of all, we've got closing times of pubs, right? And this was one of the reasons I made this video, was talking about closing times. We're going to close down the pubs and clubs at 2 AM is the latest, so that no one's drinking too much and everyone can go home. Does that... I'm not saying that's necessarily the all-out whole one specific reason. They're saying 2 o'clock is the closing time, but with the recent application that was made, and they're saying, no, we've got enough people causing problems in town at that time, we don't need more, I've got to assume that 2 o'clock is one of them reasons. So does actually having a curfew on when all the pubs and clubs have got to close stop people binge drinking, or stop people drinking too much? I would argue no, it doesn't. I would argue the opposite, in fact. I think you finish work on a Friday, you get home about 6 o'clock, something like that, you get ready, do whatever you've got to do, and you end up in town for 8-9 o'clock. You now have a finite amount of time in order to have a drink, get drunk if that's your aim, which obviously with the binge drinking it is, and enjoy being drunk before the pub closes. Usually with the nightclubs, they really only start getting lively at sort of midnight, or after 11 o'clock when all the other pubs have shut. So you've got this sort of 3-hour window in actual nightclub time, and that's where everyone wants to be, is in the nightclubs. And you don't want to be in the nightclub sober, because if you're like me and you've got 2 left feet, I can't dance if I'm sober. So you've sort of got this time frame that you need to aim for. If your intention is to be drunk in the nightclub, right, I need to drink as much as I can so that I'm drunk at the time between 11 and 2, so I can get maximum enjoyment out of being drunk in that nightclub, because that's where I want to be, and I want to be drunk when I'm there. Well, if you said, actually, okay guys, there's no rush, that you can have until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning if you want, then suddenly that window opens up and you say you don't need to go hell for leather to try and make sure you're drunk by the time you get to the nightclub, or you don't have to worry that the night's going to be over soon and I don't feel I've got my fill, because it's going to go on till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And in fact, when you talk about having crowds of people all piling out of nightclubs, well, I can tell you now, if the nightclubs went on until 4 o'clock in the morning, most people would have just gone home of their own free will, rather than that club being full to the brim and having to chuck everyone out. Okay? And secondly, the tax on alcohol. So whenever they increase the tax on alcohol, or at least one of the reasons is to try and stem the amount of alcohol that is being purchased and being drunk, more importantly. And there are studies that prove that this is true, that when you put the only way you can put the price up of alcohol, the government can control alcohol, is through tax. So that's what they do, they increase the tax to try and stem the amount of alcohol being drunk. And there are studies that show that that does happen, and it does work, and it does stem the amount of alcohol being drunk. However, what I've noticed, and I'm sure a lot of people agree, is that as soon as you start putting the price of alcohol up, it gets so much more expensive in pubs and clubs compared to the supermarket, that rather than say, okay, do you know what, alcohol's just ridiculous, I'm just not going to buy it, you just say, okay, I now can't afford to buy it in the pubs and clubs, so rather I'll go and buy it in the supermarket. Okay, so you bought it in the supermarket, but you're not allowed in the nightclubs with it. Okay, I'll drink it before I go in the nightclub. So what you end up with, and I'm sure everyone has heard this term, pre-drinking, we're having pre-drinks. What happens now is everyone congregates at one person's house or flat, or whoever lives closest to town or is willing to put everyone up, and you have pre-drinks. Which means now you've bought all this alcohol, which you've bought probably way more than you would have bought if you were in a pub, and no one is watching to make sure you don't drink too much of it or how much you're drinking of it or whatnot. No one's controlling the measures that you're putting in your drinks or anything like that. You can literally sit and neck a bottle of vodka and then go into town. And that's what people do. They will sit at home, they'll have a few drinks, blah blah blah, blah, and just before they go into town, they'll neck a load of alcohol, so that when they get to town, it's hit them and they don't have to pay the huge prices in the nightclubs. Well, hang on a minute. If you were raising the price of alcohol to stem binge drinking, what you've done is actually, now that time frame they had to drink, which was from 8-9 o'clock when everyone was starting to go out, or maybe even 5 o'clock till 2 o'clock in the morning, now you're actually saying you've got until 10 o'clock when you decide to leave your friend's house to get as much cheap alcohol in you as possible. Which is even worse. It's even worse. Now you're like forcing people to binge drink because it's unaffordable to do anything else. So now you've got people who are going into town and they don't realise how drunk they are and how drunk they're going to be. They get into the nightclubs, they buy a few drinks in the nightclubs, and then suddenly it hits them, all this alcohol that they've drunk whilst they were at home, and all of a sudden these people are absolutely bladdered and getting chucked out, and fights and arguments and all the rest of it, and people vomiting on the streets and stuff like that. Raising the taxes on alcohol, the only thing I think it can do is make the business for pub and club owners more difficult, because they have to try and justify their higher prices, and it forces people to just binge drink at home before they go out, and probably drink a lot more and a lot quicker than they would have done if they'd have been able to go to the pub and buy it cheaply in the pub and have a longer period of time to drink over. Now, you might think, okay, what are you suggesting, that we make alcohol cheap as non-alcoholic drinks and let everyone drink it until 5 o'clock in the morning? It would be mayhem. Yeah, it would. It probably would. For a period of time. Because what we're looking at here is not the laws around drinking, we're looking at the culture around drinking. And cultures don't change overnight. We have to educate people into a new culture of drinking. Because This culture of binge drinking exists in the UK and it exists in several other countries around the world. But it's not a global thing. It is just a select few countries and a select few cultures that have this problem. We've all been on holiday to other countries where you see the avenue that's full of bars and clubs and all the rest of it, and you never see drunk people there. It's like, I mean, you go to Amsterdam, which is just full of bars everywhere. It's very hard to find a drunk person. It's amazingly hard. That's probably because they're all high, but it's very hard to find a drunk person. And then you have that cringe-worthy moment when you finally do spot someone who's drunk and they've got an England shirt on, and you're just like, typical. But it's a culture. It's a culture we're trying to change, and that is not going to happen overnight. And I think the people who are already indulging in the current culture that we have, if you change the rules and the taxes on alcohol and the club opening times, they would probably see it as, party time, we can do what we're doing at the moment, but we can just do it more. Yeah, probably. But the next round of people who come into this culture, I think over time it would reduce, and I think people would start having more of what I'm going to call a European approach, which is that alcohol is not something that the primary intention is to become intoxicated, and that the short period of time, which we see in the definition of binge drinking, I don't think they would be factors anymore. And actually we'd start treating alcohol as we'd all like to think we should, which is just as a social lubricant or as a celebration or something to stress after a particularly stressful week, not just because it's Friday you've had a stressful week. So those are my views on the drinking culture in Jersey and how I think it needs to be more long-sighted solutions and not short-sighted solutions like stick the price up, don't let people drink after 2 o'clock, no. No, I think we need more long-term solutions to change the culture, not change the rules. As always, this is just my opinion. Send me your thoughts, send me your comments, and hopefully we'll get a discussion going about it. Thanks for listening, guys.